Alexander Skarsgard and Margot Robbie sure look the part, but how do they measure up to Disney's original Tarzan and Jane?
Tarzan. Jane.
Jane.
2016's The Legend of Tarzan trades animal animation for epic CGI, but there are a few things missing, like best friends Terk and Tantor. However, the 2016 version is actually a lot closer to Tarzan's origins than you might think. From how they mastered that epic ape battle to the voices behind the Disney original, here's a look behind the scenes at the making of Tarzan, and all the most interesting changes, tricks, and movie magic used to create the Jungle Dwellers' wild world.
So how you want to play this thing?
Their leader will come down, and we'll fight.
Originally published in 1912, Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs was the first of 24 novels about an orphan who's raised by primates. The book has pretty much everything the movies do. There's vine swinging, monkey fights, and of course, Jane. Burroughs claimed his story was loosely based on a myth about twin brothers Romulus and Remus, who, instead of their parents being shipwrecked in a jungle like Tarzan's, were sentenced to be drowned to prevent them from claiming their uncle's throne. They wound up floating down the river and were found by a wolf and a woodpecker, instead of the motherly ape who finds Tarzan.
So where's his mama?
Well, I'm going to be his mother now.
But there's also evidence that the story could have been inspired by a real person, the 14th Earl of Stratham, William Charles Milden. After his passing, he left 1,500 handwritten pages of memoirs detailing his adventures after being marooned in the jungle and taken in by apes. Though unlike Tarzan, he never became their leader. Instead, he eventually left them to join a local tribe, which is much more similar to the path Tarzan takes in the 2016 film.
And learned to be as one with them.
The biggest difference between the two movies is how their star-studded casts got to portray their characters. Disney had an amazing team of voice actors behind the 1999 classic. Tony Goldwyn and Minnie Driver voiced Tarzan and Jane, while Glenn Close took on the role of Kala, and Rosie O'Donnell was the voice of Terk. For Tony, the inspiration behind Tarzan came from picturing a guy who was really into extreme sports, which makes sense with all that tree surfing and vine swinging. As for Jane, Minnie Driver's emotive performance was used to create Jane's exaggerated facial expressions.
So she was really expressive. So we took that and put it into the design.
The Legend of Tarzan didn't rely on animation, but focused more on a mix of live action and CGI. It was directed by David Yates, who also did the last 4 Harry Potter films, so he's no stranger to epic special effects. As for the casting, Margot Robbie was an easy choice for Jane, and Alexander Skarsgard is almost the spitting image of Tarzan, although he's definitely more serious. A lot of the filming environment wasn't lush jungle. Instead, it was green screen and props, so the actors had to work in a similar way to the voice actors. They had to imagine what the final product might actually look like, so they could seem convincing when they were faced with people in gray suits who would later be transformed into some scary-looking apes.
That's a coot? You sure you don't want me to shoot him?
Both films follow the general plot of the book, but with a few key differences, though none of the versions are nice to Tarzan's parents. In the book, Kala takes Tarzan in as a replacement for her own lost baby. In both film adaptations, Tarzan's parents become stranded and start to make a home for themselves in an abandoned treehouse. Tarzan ends up an orphan, but the animation has his parents attacked by jaguars, while in the live action, he loses his mother first to illness, and then his father is attacked by apes before Kala finds Tarzan.
Now I fear for my child.
When all these events take place is really up to the specific plot of each film. For Disney, Jane and her father's trek through the jungle was due to British expansion. Tarzan's family is shipwrecked around 1860, and he meets Jane around 1880. The live action starts out around 1885 because Tarzan is already an adult and staying in Britain.
And my name isn't Tarzan. It's John Clayton III.
This makes sense since Britain was still using expeditions as a source of power, hence King Leopold II claiming the Congo. Both versions make historical sense, but the live action puts a lot more effort into the expansion plot that leads to Tarzan's home being attacked, though that doesn't necessarily make the movie more fun.
I think this one will be better off stuffed.
Thankfully, the iconic moment where Tarzan meets Jane is portrayed in every adaptation. By the time they meet in the book, Tarzan has already become king of the apes. Jane is there with her father, searching for lost treasure, while in the Disney version, her and her father are researchers on an expedition. The live action is similar, with them exploring Africa on behalf of the king, except they've already heard stories about a strange man living in the jungle.
Lord of the Apes, king of the jungle. Me Tarzan, you Jane.
In the animation, Jane is lost and soon meets Tarzan, compared to her playing hide-and-seek in the live action when Tarzan steals her handkerchief. Both versions have that awkward but hilarious moment where Tarzan smells Jane to say hi. As for how Jane looks in these moments, both films are inspired by Victorian fashion, even though we kinda miss Jane's classic yellow dress.
It can't get any worse, can it?
Despite all the adaptations sticking to similar versions of Jane, Disney's version is the only one that has Tarzan's two best friends, Terk and Tantor. The rebellious young ape and the germaphobic elephant have a lot of fun in the animation, and the voice actors didn't have a hard time getting into their outrageous roles.
I didn't do anything because I feel I have innate gorilla tendencies.
As for the animators, they studied apes and elephants in their natural environments before working on character design. Legend of Tarzan doesn't portray this friendship. The character design is more realistic and focuses on apes like Kala and Akut. This version is more true to the book, but we can see why fans of the Disney version thought it was a bit boring. The special effects team studied ape behavior to design the characters, but it's more Planet of the Apes and less Jungle Book.
Yeah, well, good riddance, or I don't need you, huh?
Speaking of Akut, his fight with Tarzan in the 2016 film replaces the epic ape battle in the Disney version, where Tarzan fights Kala's mate, Kerchak. Kerchak hates Tarzan when he's young, and in the live action, Akut is Kala's biological son who feels betrayed when Tarzan leaves for England.
He was my brother once, and now he'll consider me a deserter.
Like Kerchak, Akut eventually becomes the leader of the apes. To film the scene where Tarzan fights Akut, the filmmakers designed a padded suit and a transparent helmet to make the stuntman look as large as an ape. For the Disney version, the animator studied what territorial fights between apes look like in the wild. But what about Tarzan's human co-stars? In the Disney version, Jane and her father are Tarzan's first real encounter with people. This adaptation only includes Jane, her father, and the other explorers. The live action sees Tarzan facing a lot more human foes, and it definitely makes sense that he would eventually mingle with other tribes in the jungle.
Tarzan, you look funny.
The film even includes a rival village, where Tarzan is hated because he offed the leader's son as revenge for Kala. His biggest enemy is also different. In the Disney version, it's Clayton, voiced by Brian Blessed, while in the live action, it's Leon Rom, portrayed by Christoph Waltz.
Take Tarzan with you. The future belongs to me.
To keep with the serious tone, the jungle expedition in The Legend of Tarzan has a completely different purpose than the Disney version. The Congo Basin is claimed by King Leopold II, and he's accused of exploiting its resources. This is what convinces Tarzan to return home to the jungle. Disney's version shows that Jane and her father are under the impression that they're there for innocent research purposes, but the other explorers know they're actually there to capture the apes and bring them back to England. Power and money definitely drive both teams of explorers, with the Disney version being slightly easier to thwart.
What? This should do the trick.
Now, how about Tarzan and Jane's happy ending? Both films end with the couple choosing the jungle, but they get there in pretty different ways. For one, the live action starts out with Tarzan as John Clayton III, and he's gone back to England to live a normal life with Jane. In the Disney version, we never see Tarzan in this kind of stuffy environment. He thinks about joining Jane in England, but instead they both decide that the apes are probably better than people. The live action version focuses on Tarzan's acclimation to high society life, but by the end, they can't resist the call of the jungle.
They speak of his power over the animals of the jungle.
Finally, we have to mention how both versions managed to perfectly capture Tarzan's wild jungle antics, like how he swung so easily from tree to tree. The Legend of Tarzan used a completely CG character based on a Cirque du Soleil trapeze artist, and just movie magicked Skarsgard's face onto the digital model. It took 16 cameras to properly capture his face so they could pull off this trick. In the Disney version, 3D animation was used to make the sliding and swinging seem so fluid.
How'd you know it was me?
I'm your mother. I know everything. Now, where have you been?
So, do you prefer the classic animation to the live-action Tarzan? Are there any changes that make the live-action better? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to The Things for more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.